Some of the greatest rivalries in NBA history include Magic vs. Bird, Wilt vs. Russell, Tracy McGrady vs. the First Round, and Shaq vs. Kobe, among others. But one of the least competitive rivalries, and really most one-sided rivalries, has to be Michael Jordan versus Clyde Drexler. And this so-called rivalry really took place in the late 80s, early 90s, where Clyde Drexler was viewed as the West Coast Jordan who was severely underrated. And while I don't think Drexler was on Jordan's level, him being underrated in that era is a pretty fair statement, as at his peak, he was a top 5 player, debatably top 3, who didn't get nearly as much credit as he deserved. As looking at peak Drexler, from 80 to 92, he averaged 24.8 points, 6.9 boards, 6.0 assists, 2.2 steals on 49% shooting. And Drexler's Portland teams in that time period, they were some of the best squads in the West and in the NBA in general, as they were a perennial 50-win team pushing 60 wins every single season. And for 3 consecutive years, made the West Finals, including 2 finals appearances. And looking at Drexler individually, when it came to scoring the basketball, his best trait, 3 times in that era was top 6 in scoring, and also 3 times was top 6 in MVP voting. And as good as Clyde was, as underrated as he was, playing in the same era as Michael Jordan at the exact same position, by default, you're going to get overshadowed and kind of underrated. And Clyde, all these years later, really trying to rewrite history, saying he was extremely close to Jordan as a player, I don't buy. And looking at his actual words, he says compared to Jordan, he was bigger, faster, and stronger. All you can do with that quote is really just laugh. Because first off, this is basketball, not the Olympics. We're not sprinting, high jumping, or lifting weights. Second of all, when it comes to being a confident player, a top 10 player, of course those guys' confidence is off the charts. But quotes like these, it's towing the line between confidence and straight up delusion. And again, I want to be clear, Clyde Drexler, he was a phenomenal player in that era despite being in Jordan's shadow. And if you put him maybe 10 years prior to that in the 1970s, he's probably one of the best players in that era, remembered more fondly than he was in the 1990s. Because Michael Jordan, during Drexler's peak, was also in his own peak and performing at a much higher level. As from 88 to 92, Michael Jordan averaged 32.5 points, 6.6 boards, 6.4 assists, 2.8 steals on 53% shooting. And unlike Drexler, won 3 MVPs, was 5-time All-Defensive, 5-time scoring leader, and a 1-time Defensive Player of the Year. I think you guys get the point. Clyde in the 90s was great, but for a modern comparison, he's like Kevin Durant to LeBron James, Dame to Steph Curry, and Embiid to Nikola Jokic. Of course, all great players, but one guy was simply greater and a notch better. And one more dig Drexler had at Jordan was saying MJ's stats-wise, he was only better because he shot the ball more. A pretty common attack on Michael Jordan, calling him a shot chucker, a shot jacker, who only put up high scoring numbers, but he took a ton of shots. Never mind Jordan shooting above 50% for nearly half his career, and debatably been the best high volume scorer efficiency-wise behind Kevin Durant. Never mind that. And the one time Clyde actually came pretty close as he could come to passing Jordan as the best player, actually being on Jordan's level, was 1992. And Drexler's Portland team that year, they were actually deeper than the Bulls, more experienced, more battle-tested, and I would argue, a more well-rounded team. And looking at the NBA media going into this series, the overall narrative was that Drexler was on MJ's level, and actually was more skilled and a better outside shooter.
Clyde the Glide says we're the 2 best in the game, but I'm not getting into a war of words with Mike.
Clyde was a threat. You know, I'm not saying he wasn't a threat, but me being compared to him, I took offense to that.
I'm working for NBC. I'm covering the finals. So the night before game 1, we're at Michael's house playing cards, and he said, you know what's gonna happen tomorrow. I'm gonna give it to this dude.
And the matchup at the start, Michael Jordan facing Clyde
So he hit that first three. And then here come the second one. The third one.
Three-point field goal. Michael Jordan with 4 3-pointers and a half has tied the NBA Finals record.
Michael didn't want anybody to have nothing over him.
So in game 1 of the series, what do you think happened? Of course, Michael Jordan took it personally and destroyed Clyde Drexler. As in the first half, put up 35 points, a first half finals record, made 6 3-pointers, had the shrug, and defensively held Clyde to 16 points on 5-14 shooting with 4 turnovers. And if you look at the first 4 games of this series, when it was tied 2 games apiece, Jordan was outplaying Drexler pretty severely, averaging 34 points, nearly 8 assists, 5 boards on 51, 38, and 91 splits. For the first half of the series, Jordan was definitely outplaying Drexler in all respects. And one thing I do want to highlight, despite Jordan playing fantastic in all areas, Portland started the series tied at 2-2 going to a Game 5 at home. This Game 5 in Portland was the biggest game of Clyde's career up to that point. And to Clyde's credit in this game, he kind of did show up, having 30 points, 10 boards, 3 assists on 9 of 21 shooting. Definitely pretty respectable. But when you're playing Michael Jordan, a guy of that caliber, 30, 10, and 3 simply does not cut it. As in Game 5, Jordan on the road, tied 2-2, had 46 points, 5 assists, and 4 boards on 61% shooting. If Drexler was actually better than Jordan, Game 5 at home was a time to prove it. And unfortunately for Clyde, he didn't do that. And looking at the last 2 games of the series, comparing Jordan versus Drexler, Game 5 and Game 6, Michael Jordan averaged 39.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.0 assists on just otherworldly 57-57 and 88 splits. And looking at Game 6 in Chicago, to clinch the championship, the Bulls were down by as much as 17 points at home. But Jordan in the fourth quarter had a game-high 12 points, and in the final minutes had a crucial layup on Clyde Drexler to push the lead to 4, and with under 10 seconds left, had the 2 game-icing free throws to seal the championship for the Bulls. And for the age-old narrative myth that Michael Jordan's finals competition was somehow weak, look at this Portland team. They had 6 players in double figures, nearly 7 with Danny Ainge. And you had Clyde Drexler, an MVP candidate, Terry Porter, an All-Star, Cliff Robinson, an All-Defensive member, 6th Man of the Year, Kevin Duckworth, an All-Star 91, and even Buck Williams, another All-Defensive player. And for the overall team, they ranked 4th in scoring, 3rd in defensive rating, and 7th in offensive rating. That Portland team was no joke. And what the final series versus the Bulls really came down to is that Chicago had number 23 and Portland had number 22. As when a guy can average 35 points on 50-40-90 splits, it's hard to overcome that and win that series. And the fact Portland pushed it to 6 games, almost 7, is again a testament to how good they were and how great they were as an overall team. And looking past the 92 finals to the actual dream team, Jordan and Drexler were teammates on that roster. And according to many players, Jordan at practice routinely would abuse Drexler and just take him to school every single day. And I don't know what you want to call it, psychological damage, mental dismemberment, but Drexler the next year had a noticeable decline in play and efficiency. As scoring-wise, he went from 25 points to under 20. Shooting percentage-wise, went from 47 to 43. Three-point-wise, dropped over 10%. And Portland as a team only won 51 games. Unfortunately for Clyde Drexler, the era he played in when he was drafted was in the same era as Jordan, who also played shooting guard. So all these years later, Clyde Drexler claiming he was as good as Jordan, if not better. Again, Clyde, looking at the facts, looking at history, that was never the case and never real debate or a real rivalry. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.